The air smelled of charcoal and expensive perfume, a nauseating blend that defined every Holloway gathering. I was holding a paper plate, watching my sister Camilla hold court by the buffet. Then she said it. My sister said at the family reunion. Single mothers raise broken children. It's just statistics. My twins heard every word. I pulled out my phone and projected their acceptance letters. Harvard and MIT, full rides. Then I projected her son's arrest record. She lunged for my phone. Dad shouted, "Turn it off." But everyone had already seen. The silence following wasn't peaceful. The image glowed, 10 feet wide against the white vinyl siding of my parents' house. On the left, crisp crimson letterhead welcomed my daughter to the class of 2028. On the right, a grainy mugshot showed my nephew Hunter with a split lip. The contrast was violent. Aunts usually full of gossip stood like statues, clutching their iced teas. My father's projector fan whirred loudly in the sudden quiet, sounding like a dying engine. They were too busy staring at the proof of Camilla's failure to even breathe. For 15 years, I had swallowed her poison. I smiled when she offered to buy my kids shoes because things must be tight. I nodded when she credited her husband for Hunter's stability. But today, watching my son Leo set down his fork, with a shame he didn't deserve, I broke. I didn't care about family peace anymore. The woman who wore judgment like a crown was finally naked in front of her subjects. I felt a terrifying, cold calm settle over me like armor. Camilla wasn't looking at the screen anymore, she was looking at me with feral eyes. Her knuckles were white where she gripped the buffet table, crumbling a styrofoam plate. She was the golden child, the one with the lawyer husband, and the country club membership. Now, she was just the mother of a villain. Exposed by the sister she pitied, she took a step toward me, her heels sinking into the soft grass. It was the first time I had ever seen her look truly ugly. I glanced back at the picnic table. Maya wasn't crying. She stared at her aunt with the same analytical precision she used in debate club. Leo was motionless, his eyes darting from the projector to me, assessing the threat. They weren't broken. They were the strongest people here, forged in the fire of my struggle. I had spent a lifetime trying to shield them from this moment, but that was a mistake. They needed to see the monster bleed to know it was mortal. "You ungrateful little bitch," Camilla hissed, the whisper carrying like a gunshot. She lunged again, closing the distance. My father intercepted her, wrapping his arms around her waist as she kicked at me, her designer shoe grazing my shin. The projector finally died, plunging the yard back into sunlight. But the image was burned into everyone's retinas. I didn't flinch. I just picked up my purse. The bridge wasn't just burned, I had blown it up. And the view from the other side was magnificent. I didn't look back at the chaos. My objective was simple. Get my children behind the safety of tinted glass, before the screaming started again. We marched across the manicured lawn. Our footsteps heavy on the lush grass my father prized more than his own daughters. Maya grabbed her brother's arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Nobody tried to stop us. They were too paralyzed by the spectacle. We reached my rusted sedan, a stark contrast to the SUVs lining the driveway. I fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling violently now that the adrenaline was fading. The engine sputtered before catching. A familiar groan that usually embarrassed me, but today sounded like freedom. I threw the car into reverse, tires crunching over the gravel. In the rearview mirror, I saw my mother standing on the porch, hand over her mouth. She hadn't moved to help me. She hadn't moved to help Camilla. She just watched. A silent ghost haunting her own life. We hit the main road and I accelerated, putting miles between us and the wreckage of the reunion. The silence in the car was heavy, thicker than the humid afternoon air. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Had I gone too far? I had exposed a 19-year-old's addiction to vindicate myself. The righteousness I felt back in the yard began to curdle into nausea. I glanced at the twins in the back seat. They were staring straight ahead. "I'm sorry?" I whispered, the words scratching my throat. I shouldn't have done that to Hunter. I waited for the accusation, for Maya to tell me I was cruel, or for Leo to say I was no better than Camilla. The air conditioner blasted warm air, failing to cool the stifling heat inside the cabin. I watched a bead of sweat roll down Leo's temple. He turned his head slowly toward his sister. The tension stretched tight, ready to snap. Leo let out a sound that I mistook for a sob. I braced myself, ready to pull over and comfort him. Then he did it again, louder this time. It wasn't a sob. It was a snort. "Mom," he choked out, his shoulders shaking. "Did you see Aunt Camilla's face? She looked like she swallowed a lemon whole." Maya covered her mouth, her eyes crinkling at the corners. The dam broke. They weren't traumatized. They were absolutely delighted. "Savage," Maya declared, her voice steady and full of awe. That was completely savage. Laughter erupted from the back seat, loud and hysterical, washing away the years of polite silence we had endured. I started laughing too. Desperate, gasping sound that mixed with tears. We were a car full of fugitives speeding down the highway, united by the arson we had just committed. The fear in my chest dissolved. They weren't fragile glass dolls. They were iron, just like me. The laughter faded into a comfortable quiet as we neared our exit. Leo leaned forward, resting his chin on my seat. "You know we knew about Hunter, right?" he asked softly. I froze, my foot hovering over the brake. "We've known for 2 years," Maya added, scrolling through her phone. "Hunter texts us sometimes. He hates her, Mom." I stared at the road, realizing my children had been protecting me from the truth, just as hard as I protected them. We pulled into the driveway, light sweeping across the peeling paint on the garage door. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. The silence of the house welcomed us like a warm blanket, after the reunion's freezing judgment. Leo carried his jacket, whistling a tune I didn't recognize. Maya headed for the fridge. I stood in the entryway, listening to the refrigerator hum. It felt different tonight. It felt like a fortress we had successfully defended against a siege. I sat at the island and spread the paperwork on the granite. The numbers were staggering in black and white. $300,000 for Harvard. Another $300,000 for MIT. It was more money than I had earned in my first decade of working. My hands smoothed the crisp paper, feeling the texture of relief. Camilla had her country club memberships and leased luxury cars. I had this. This was the currency that actually mattered. But victory had a strange, hollow aftertaste. The bold figures blurred into memories of the lean years. I remembered heating cans of soup because fresh produce was a luxury. I remembered Camilla telling me that maybe if you budgeted better, I wouldn't be so tired. She didn't know I was working double shifts to keep the twins in music lessons. I had traded my sleep for their future, hour by grueling hour. Every missed recital and every lonely night was an investment. Today, that investment had finally matured into something tangible. My phone vibrated against the countertop, dancing aggressively near the fruit bowl. I didn't want to look, but the screen lit up with notification after notification. The Holloway family updates. Group chat was exploding. Cousin Sarah called me toxic. Aunt Linda said I needed Jesus. They were rallying around Camilla, protecting the wounded queen bee, while ignoring the years she spent stinging us. I watched the messages scroll by, a digital lynch mob of people who barely knew my children's middle names. A pang of guilt struck me when I saw a photo of Camilla crying. Her husband, Gerald, posted it with the caption, "Praying for peace." I almost typed a defense, almost explained that she drew first blood. But then I looked up. Leo was showing Maya a meme on his phone, and they were laughing. Genuine, unburdened laughter. If I had stayed silent today, they would be quiet tonight. They would be internalizing the shame. I put the phone down. No apologies. The buzzing stopped, then one final message arrived. It wasn't in the group chat. It was a direct text from my mother. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the glass. My mother, the woman who stood on the porch and did nothing. I expected a lecture about decorum or a demand to fix things. Instead, the preview showed just 3 words. He looks thin. She wasn't talking about Leo. She was talking about Hunter. She had finally seen the mugshot on the screen. It was the first time she had acknowledged the cracks in Camilla's perfect portrait. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't congratulate the twins on the Ivy League. But she had seen the truth I forced into the light. It wasn't support. But it was an acknowledgement of reality. I turned the phone face down. The war wasn't over, but the propaganda machine was broken. I looked at the letters again. We were free, but the cost was my entire family. It had been 48 hours since the reunion, and the family's digital counter, offensive, was in full swing. I sat in my gray fabric cubicle, scrolling through Camilla's Facebook feed on my lunch break. She hadn't addressed the arrest record directly. Instead, she posted photos of a sunset with captions about toxic jealousy and praying for those who have lost their way. It was masterful spin. She was the victim of an unstable sister, not the mother of a struggling addict. My phone buzzed against the laminate desk, vibrating aggressively like an angry hornet. The screen flashed. DAD. I debated letting it go to voicemail, but hiding felt like something the old, apologetic Josephine would do. I picked up the device, walking briskly toward the emergency stairwell for privacy. The concrete echo chamber amplified his voice before I even said hello. You need to fix this. Josephine. He barked. No greeting. Just a command issued to a subordinate he expected to obey. Fix what? I asked, leaning against the cold metal railing. The truth. He didn't pause for breath. He told me Camilla was devastated, that her husband was threatening to sue for defamation, and that I was tearing the family apart. You take back those pictures, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. You tell everyone you forged them. Or don't bother coming to Christmas. The threat hung in the stairwell, heavy and suffocating, bouncing off the walls. And don't expect a penny of the estate, he added, playing his favorite ace. I won't fund a traitor. I almost laughed. For years, that financial threat had kept me silent, terrified of losing the safety net I might need for the twins. But the twins were funded. Harvard and MIT were paying for everything. His money was just paper now, holding no gravity. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I was finally untouchable. I won't lie for her anymore, Dad, I said, my voice steady. They are public records. If Hunter is embarrassed, he should stop getting arrested. If Camilla is embarrassed, she should help him instead of attacking me. I didn't wait for his rebuttal. I didn't wait for the explosion. I pressed the red button and ended the call. It was the first time in 44 years I had hung up on my father. My hands weren't even shaking. The silence in the stairwell was profound, broken only by the hum of the ventilation system. I looked at the contact info on my screen, the picture of him grinning at a fishing trip I wasn't invited to. I tapped the 3 dots in the corner. Block contact. The confirmation window popped up, asking if I was sure. I tapped yes, without blinking. Then I did the same for Camilla. It was surgical amputation, painful but necessary to stop the rot. That evening, I opened LinkedIn to check a job posting for a colleague. The Who viewed your profile. Notification caught my eye. Among the recruiters and random connections, one face stood out. It was a profile with no photo. Just a gray silhouette, but the name was clear: Hunter Holloway. He wasn't blocked. He was watching. And unlike the rest of the family, he hadn't sent a single hateful message. He was just there, a ghost haunting my digital footprint. The week following the purge felt deceptively normal. We focused on the logistics of departure, turning our living room into a staging ground for dorm life. I have bedding sets, in extra, long twin size piled up like snowdrifts against the sofa. Maya was obsessing over color schemes, while Leo calculated the amperage of his mini fridge. They were lighter, unburdened by the family secret they had carried for years. I watched them pack, feeling a fragile peace settle over the house. But peace is often just the eye of the storm. My phone rang during dinner, vibrating against the oak table and startling us all. The caller ID didn't say Dad or Camilla. This time, it displayed a generic local number labeled County Detention Center. I froze, fork hovering halfway to my mouth. The twins went silent, exchanging a look that communicated volumes. I knew who it was before I even pressed answer. It wasn't a telemarketer. It was the ghost I had summoned at the reunion, calling from the other side of the bars. I accepted the charges, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Joe. The voice was thin, stripped of the arrogance Hunter usually wore at holiday dinners. It sounded like the scared boy he used to be before the money and the neglect ruined him. I didn't know who else to call. He stammered. Mom blocked my number. The admission hung in the air. Camilla hadn't just blocked me, she had cut off her own son to save her narrative. She said she's teaching me a lesson. Hunter whispered, his voice cracking. But she just doesn't want to deal with the lawyer until the press dies down. I gripped the phone tighter. Camilla was spinning a story of tough love to the public, while leaving her 19-year-old to rot in a holding cell. It was strategic abandonment. I can't stay here. Joe. I am sick. I need help. He wasn't talking about legal counsel. He was going through withdrawal. I looked at my own children across the table. They were safe, fed, and heading to the Ivy League. Hunter was alone in a concrete box, shaking from withdrawal, discarded because he damaged the family brand. I hated Camilla with a fire that could burn cities, but I couldn't hate him. He was the statistic she had warned everyone about, created by the very structure she worshipped. Where are you? I asked, grabbing my purse. I'm coming. I ended the call and looked at the twins. I have to go get him, I said, expecting pushback. I expected them to remind me of the insults, the bullying, the years of torment. Instead, Leo stood up and grabbed his keys. We're coming with you, he said simply. He's not his mother. Maya was already putting on her shoes. Besides, she added, checking her phone. He told us months ago that you were the only adult who ever looked him in the eye. We drove to the jail in silence. The city lights blurring past like streaks of compromised morality. Hunter wasn't just a messed-up kid. He was collateral damage in Camilla's war for perfection. When he stumbled out of the processing center, pale and shivering, he didn't look like a criminal. He looked like a refugee. He climbed into the backseat next to Leo. She told the police I was with you guys? He mumbled, closing his eyes. She blamed you for the drugs. The bail bondsman took the cash I had saved for a celebratory cruise. It was $5,000 of hard work, gone in a transaction that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. I didn't care. Driving home, Hunter shivered violently in the back seat, his teeth chattering a rhythm of pure misery. He smelled of vomit and antiseptic, a scent that filled the car and made my eyes water uncontrollably. I'm sorry, he kept mumbling. He wasn't apologizing for the arrest. He was apologizing for existing. We guided him into the house, like a wounded soldier returning from a lost war. My living room, currently chaotic staging ground for Ivy League dorms, felt suddenly small. Hunter collapsed onto the sofa, curling into a fetal position among the extra, long twin sheets. She said I couldn't come home, he whispered, clutching a throw pillow. She said the neighbors were watching. That was Camilla's priority. Not her son's failing organs or his terrified mind, but the neighbors' prying and judgmental eyes. Leo brought a glass of water and a bucket, placing them within Hunter's reach. Maya found a heavy blanket. They moved with a silent, synchronized efficiency that made my chest ache. They weren't judging him for the mugshot or the lies his mother told. They were just seeing a cousin in pain. I went to the kitchen to make toast, trying to steady my shaking hands against the counter. Then I saw the lights. High beams cut through the front window, blinding white and aggressive. A car door slammed with the force of a gunshot. I knew that sound. It was the heavy thud of a luxury SUV, being treated with contempt. Steps pounded up the walkway, sharp designer heels clicking on the concrete like a countdown. I didn't need to look through the peephole to know who was standing on my porch. The lioness had come to reclaim the cub she had thrown to the wolves. Now that someone else dared to show him mercy and care, I opened the door before she could pound on it. Camilla stood there, her makeup flawless but her eyes wild. She looked past me, scanning the interior of my house like a health inspector looking for a violation. "Where is he?" she demanded, not stepping inside but leaning in close enough for me to smell her expensive wine breath. "You have no right, Josephine. That is my son. You are interfering with a parental disciplinary decision regarding him." She made abandonment sound like a timeout. "He's not a discipline case, Camilla," I said, blocking the doorway with my body. "He's in withdrawal. He needs a doctor, not a lesson." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "He's fine," she snapped, waving a manicured hand dismissively. "He's just dramatic. He gets that from your side of the family." Even now, with her son shaking on my couch, she was categorizing his pain as a genetic defect inherited from anyone but herself and her perfect lineage. She tried to push past me, her shoulder checking mine with surprising force. "Hunter, get in the car right now," she screamed into the house. I heard a whimper from the living room, followed by the sound of violent retching. "You're making him sick," I said, grabbing her arm to stop her advance. Her muscles were tense, rigid with the effort of maintaining her delusion. "He told me you blamed my kids," I hissed. "You told the police my honor students gave him drugs." Camilla ripped her arm away, her face twisting into a sneer. "Well, someone had to influence him," she spat. "Hunter is a good boy. He doesn't just do these things on his own." There it was. The absolute refusal to accept dirty reality. She would rather destroy my children's reputations than admit her perfect home was flawed and crumbling. I stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me, the latch clicking with a finality that felt like a judge's gavel. "He stays here?" I said, my voice dropping to a register I didn't know I possessed. "I paid his bail. I signed the paperwork. Legally, he is in my custody until his court date." Camilla laughed, a brittle, jagged sound. You can't afford him. You can barely afford this shack." She gestured at my peeling paint. "I used the vacation fund." I lied, though the bail took it all. "I'd rather spend it on saving him than pretending I am rich and happy." She stared at me, the insult failing to land. The power dynamic had shifted tectonically. She had money, but I had the moral high ground, and more importantly, I had her son. "If you try to take him," I said, "I will call the police and show them the texts where you told him to sleep on the street." Her face went pale. The neighbors were watching now. I crossed my arms. Broken. Sister was finally holding all the cards tonight. "You're kidnapping him," Camilla shrieked, her voice cracking in a way that would have mortified her at the country club. She jabbed a finger at my chest, her nail digging into my collarbone. "I'm calling the police, Josephine. I'll tell them you are holding him against his will." I didn't flinch. I just held up the pink carbon copy of the bail receipt, waving it gently in the night air. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "The police released him to me, Camilla. They know exactly where he is. Dad will write you out of the will tonight." She spat, pivoting to the only weapon she understood: money. "You won't get a dime. You'll die poor in this dump." It was a threat that used to make my stomach turn, but tonight it sounded like a joke. I don't care, I said, stepping closer until I was in her personal space. My children have full rides. Your money is useless here. Keep the inheritance. Use it to pay for the rehab he desperately needs. Camilla opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. I saw his arms, Camilla. She froze. When we put him on the couch, his sleeves rode up. The bruises aren't from needles. They're shaped like fingers. Big fingers. I watched her throat work as she swallowed hard. Did Gerald do that? Or did he just pay someone to look the other way while you screamed at him? Her silence was louder than her yelling. The carefully curated image of her marriage was dissolving. He fell. She whispered, the lie so automatic it was pathetic. Hunter is clumsy when he's using. I shook my head slowly. He told me, Camilla. He told me he's afraid to go home because Gerald throws things when he drinks. I leaned in, dropping my voice to a lethal whisper. If you try to take him out of this house tonight, I won't just call the police. I will show them the photos I just took of those bruises. I will ruin you. The color drained from her face, leaving her foundation looking like a mask of yellow clay. You wouldn't? She breathed. I am your sister. I didn't blink. And he is your son. You were supposed to protect him. I pointed toward her massive SUV idling in the driveway. Here is the deal. You leave. You go home and you tell Gerald that Hunter is staying with his aunt for the summer. You get him real help, not a cover-up. Or, I burn your reputation to the ground. Camilla looked at the door behind me, then back at the car. Her shoulders slumped, the tension wire finally snapping. She wasn't the scary older sister anymore. She was just a terrified woman married to a bully, projecting her weakness onto everyone else. Tears leaked from her eyes, ruining the mascara she had applied so carefully for her warpath. He won't listen to me, she sobbed, a sudden, jagged confession. Gerald says it's my fault he's weak. It was a pitiful admission. I heard the front door creak open behind me. I didn't turn around, but I felt the presence of my children. Camilla looked up and saw them standing there in the entryway. Leo and Maya, the broken statistics, were standing tall and unified. They weren't looking at her with fear. They were looking at her with a profound, crushing disappointment. They saw the wizard behind the curtain, and she was just a small, sad person pulling levers. The shame on Camilla's face was absolute. Just go, I said softly, feeling the fight drain out of me. There was no joy in this victory. We'll take care of him. Camilla wiped her face with the back of her hand, smearing black streaks across her cheek. She nodded once, a jerky, broken motion, turned away. She stumbled slightly on the walkway, her grace completely evaporated. The clack of her heels was slower now, lacking the aggressive cadence of her arrival. She looked small against the backdrop of the dark street. I watched her climb into the driver's seat. The heavy door slammed, sealing her back into her lonely, expensive world. I turned to face my children. I expected them to be angry or frightened by the confrontation, but Maya just shook her head slowly. She's so lonely, Maya said quietly. She has everything, and she has no one. Leo nodded in agreement. It's sad, he added. She thinks love is a transaction. They had dissected her cruelty and found only emptiness inside. Is he asleep? I asked, needing to focus on the living. Yeah, Leo said. He stopped shaking. I put my arms around both of them, pulling them into a huddle on the porch. The night air was humid, heavy with the scent of impending rain. We weren't the broken ones. We were the shelter. I looked at the taillights of Camilla's car fading into the distance. I realized I had finally stopped seeking her approval. I didn't need it. I had something much better. August heat in Boston was suffocating, turning the sidewalk into a skillet. We played Tetris with the trunk, jamming a mini fridge against a crate of textbooks. Leo was sweating through his T-shirt, Yulf arguing with Maya about who got control of the auxiliary cord for the drive. It was a chaotic mess of cardboard and duct tape. I watched them laugh, realizing this was the last time we would be a daily unit. The sedan sat low on its suspension, heavy with the weight of their future. The drop-off was a blur of hugs and unfamiliar dorm smells. I expected to cry when I hugged Maya outside her hall, but the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt a fierce, vibrating pride that made my hands steady. Go be brilliant, I told them, kissing their foreheads. They didn't look back as they walked away into the crowd of students. They walked with the confidence of kings. They weren't escaping a broken home, they were launching from a solid foundation. The drive back was quiet. But my phone offered a different kind of noise. A notification popped up from Arizona. It was a photo from Hunter, looking tan and holding a sobriety chip. He had been in the private facility for 60 days, paid for by Gerald's guilt and my stubbornness. Camilla hadn't visited him yet. But she hadn't blocked the payments either. It was a start. He looked like himself again, the shadows under his eyes replaced by a cautious, fragile hope. I walked into the house, the silence greeting me like an old friend. The hallway still smelled faintly of the pizza we ordered the night before. For years, I feared this silence, thinking it would confirm my loneliness. I thought an empty nest meant I had served my purpose, and was now obsolete. But standing there, keys in hand, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt like a marathon runner crossing the finish line, lungs burning but victorious. The race was finally over. I walked to the living room wall, where the shrine still hung. The acceptance letters from Harvard and MIT were framed in glass, reflecting the evening light. They had been my shield against the world's judgment for months. Now, they just looked like paper. I took them down, leaving 2 pale squares on the dusty yellow paint. I replaced them with a candid photo from the car ride. 3 of us laughing, heads thrown back, looking unpolished and perfectly happy. I sat on the couch. The same one where I had nursed Hunter through his withdrawal. The house wasn't empty, it was full of echoes. I thought about the statistics Camilla loved so much. The numbers that said we were doomed to fail. I looked at the photo on the wall. We had beaten the odds not because we were special, but because we showed up. The statistics could say whatever they wanted. I closed my eyes and listened to the beautiful, unbroken silence.